Hello, my name is Adam Gawlikowski and welcome to Leadership in Life. Our third session is on the subject of listening. In this session, you'll be challenged to practice 3 behaviors: thinking before you speak, practicing the 5 behaviors of effective listening, and covering the conversation. At the end of this video, you'll be asked to email me examples of how this information actually helped you be a better listener. Let's get started by looking at all the forms of communication and identifying the fact that listening is absolutely the most difficult. And the main reason that listening is the most difficult is because we actually think 5 times faster than we can speak. The average person speaks at a rate of 125 words a minute, where the average person listens at a rate of 500 words per minute. That's why we finish people's sentences. We think faster than they can speak, therefore we're way ahead of them, and we finish their sentence for them. Of course, another reason we finish sentences for people is because we want to begin talking about ourselves sooner. In addition, psychologists have determined that human beings have 40,000 thoughts a day. I actually counted it myself and I came up with 42,000 thoughts. And what that means is that our mind is racing with thoughts constantly every minute of our day. Now, I need to identify that there's a difference between hearing and listening. Actually, hearing is quite easy. If we have ears and they're working, we can hear pretty well. Listening, however, takes a great deal of effort. For example, as I tap on the palm of my hand and talk with you, you are hearing both things happen at the same time. However, what I'm wondering is what you're actually listening to. Here's another example. When someone's talking to us and we're not actually paying much attention to them, they'll raise their voice and they'll look at us and say, "Are you paying attention to me?" And then we'll respond back, "I hear you." And then the person says back to us, "I know you can hear me, but are you listening to me?" Have you been part of that dialogue? Do you want that dialogue to happen again? Probably not. So let's take a look at the 4 common communication skills. And they are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The question is, what % of time do we spend in each of those 4 communication behaviors? Well, first of all, in writing, we spend 9% of our time, which includes the time we spend writing, taking notes, and banging on our keyboard. Now, when we bang on our keyboard, we actually don't do very much writing unless we're blogging or we're writing an email. Pretty much the rest of the time we surf, tweet, copy, paste, listen, and read. Which takes us to the second one, reading. And by the way, that composes 16% of our time, which is quite an impressive number. It means that 3 out of 4 Americans actually read every single day. They read books, magazines, and many other forms of print. And reading is good. And if you're not reading, you might want to consider doing so. The remaining 75% is split between listening and speaking. And unfortunately, statistics say we spend 35% of our time listening and 40% of our time speaking. Okay, I can accept that 40% of our waking life is spent speaking. However, we've all heard the argument that because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, we should listen twice as much as we speak. But unfortunately, it also means that listening is twice as hard. However, I think humans are too self-indulgent to do that much listening. Actually, people would rather be talking than listening, and on top of that, they'd rather be talking about themselves. Of course, the reason is people believe they have a lot to say. They know the most about one person, and that's themselves. In the first place, speaking is easy. All we have to do is open our mouth and words come out. We don't even think of what we're going to say. We just open our mouth and out it comes. And some of the time, we even have to apologize for what we said because we didn't think first. My first experience about learning the importance of thinking before I speak happened when I was in college. I had come home from 2 years of service in the military, exercising my GI Bill. I went back to college, and I had a speech professor named Dr. Alan Huckleberry, who after a couple of weeks of school began to develop a relationship with me, and he invited me to come to his home when he was having a faculty party. I went to the party, and it was a great experience for me. I got to meet a lot of faculty members, had a great time, had a lot to say. There were a lot of pocket conversations, and I dabbled and moved into a lot of different pocket conversations, and really thought it was a great experience. I thought that most people I spoke to realized and recognized that I had something to contribute, and I felt pretty good about the whole experience. When I came back to class the following Monday, Dr. Huckleberry asked me how did I like my experience, and I said, well, it was fabulous. I talked to a lot of people, I had a lot to say, it was a great experience. He said, well then, you know what, we're having another party next week, I'd like you to come again, but this time, I want you to think before you speak. Meaning that I'd like you to think of what you want to say before you say it, and then say it. Well, I did that. I went to the party, and I found out something really interesting. As I was talking with different groups of people, and I was thinking what I wanted to say, by the time I'm ready to say it, they had gone off to another subject, or a different vein. And I couldn't say what I wanted to say, so 50% of what I wanted to say did not get said. Well, I came back to class the following Monday. Dr. Huckleberry looks at me and says, well, how'd you like the party? And I said it was great. But however, that experiment you wanted me to do, what happened was that I couldn't say 50% of what I wanted to say. And he looked at me and he said, good. And that made me realize that the importance of simply blurting out words is not good. And when we can do it, and we can't do it all the time, we need to think about what we're going to say. Now, there are thousands and thousands of articles with long lists of behaviors to be an effective listener. Now, I've captured 5 of them, which I believe are the magic ones that absolutely, positively work. And the first one is to stop talking. It's amazing. When we stop talking, we're putting ourselves in a position to listen. The second one is to maintain eye contact. When we maintain eye contact, we are focusing on the person and what they're saying, which leads us to step 3, which is focus your attention on what the speaker is saying. So while we're focusing our attention on what the speaker is saying, we're also maintaining eye contact at the same time. The fourth is to observe nonverbal cues. When a person sends a message to you and you're making eye contact, you can make sure that their facial expression complements the words that come out of their mouth. And of course, the fifth one is to provide feedback. Making sure you feed back to the person what you believe they're saying and what you believe you understood. And when you provide feedback, please do not talk about yourself. Which leads me to the third portion of this video, which is on the subject of covering the conversation. Now, what happens with most people is that a person will come up to another person and they'll say, hey, Adam, boy, my shoulder's really been bothering me today. And then Adam's going to respond by saying, you know, my back is really hurting me. Did you ever notice that? When you start talking about something that's going on with you, the other person starts talking about something that's going on with them. And I have an analogy for this. It's like a set of railroad tracks, where one person is on one rail and another person's on the other rail. And when one person's talking, the other person's kind of waiting for them to take a breath, and then they jump in and start talking about themselves. And then the other person's waiting for them to take a breath, and they jump in and talk about themselves. We keep talking about ourselves, and we do not cover the conversation. Now, in covering the conversation, here's what we're actually doing. We are showing interest in what the person is saying. We are being empathetic to their concern, to what's going on in their life. And third, we're asking questions. Now, I gave this test to a couple of people in our leadership classes, and one gentleman actually went to his job, and when a young lady came into work in the morning, the guy said, "Good morning, how's everything with you?" And she said, "Oh, our house is a mess today. It was a wreck. You should have seen what happened." And he said, "What did happen?" And she said, "Well, my son got up in the morning and he told me that he had to have a report done in Excel and he had to do it within the next 20 minutes. So then the manager said, "Well, what did you do?" He kept covering the conversation. And she kept telling him all the things that happened. And when it was all done, he was expecting her to say to him, "So, how's everything with you?" But you know what she said? "Thank you, see you later." And she walked away. So the idea is that when you cover the conversation, don't expect people to reciprocate and ask about you. Because unfortunately, people like to talk about only themselves. As promised, I'm going to ask you to practice the following behaviors to be an effective listener. First of all, concentrate on thinking before you speak. Second, practice the 5 behaviors of effective listening. Third, when people tell you something about themselves, please remember to cover the conversation. Ask questions about what the person's talking about, and don't talk about yourself. After practicing these behaviors for 7 days, please share your results in an email to me at adamg@appliedleadershipservices.com. Finally, tell your friends about this video and ask them to watch it.